What's up, brand builders? Stephen Hurahan here on the Brand Master podcast. And in this episode, we're speaking with branding legend, the one, the only, Mr. Marty Neumeier. Now, Marty Neumeier is an absolute pioneer in the branding industry, and he's the best-selling author of industry classics such as the brand Gap, Zag, and the brand Flip, to name a few. And in our chat today, Marty shares his wisdom on how to master brand strategy and ask bigger questions to connect your brand with your audience. So if you want to learn what brand strategy is, how this discipline is evolving, and the skills that you can develop and the steps that you can take to become a brand strategist, then stick around for this episode of the Brand Master Podcast. Welcome to the Brand Master Podcast, a show specialized in helping branding professionals and entrepreneurs to build brands using strategy, psychology, and creative thinking. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Brand Master Podcast. I'm absolutely delighted and privileged to have the one and only Marty Neumeier on our show with us today. Marty, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today.
Oh, my pleasure, Stephen. This is going to be great. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, I'm a fan of yours, and when I say it's a privilege and an honor to have you on the show, I absolutely mean that. When I got into design and branding, I quickly realized that branding was what I was happiest doing and where I wanted to be. So that's when I started to kind of dive down that rabbit hole and learn a bit more and started to dig deeper. And that's when I came across the brand Gap. And that is what completely opened my mind to, what branding was all about. Did you ever expect that book would be so popular and put you on this trajectory to be a pioneer in the space?
Well, I hoped it would, but I when I wrote it, I realized this was either going to be a home run or I was going to strike out. It was, because I wrote the book and designed the book in such a counterintuitive way, or at least a way that was, in a style that was not typical of business books. It's short, it's succinct, it's designed, even the writing is designed in the sense of being very succinct and memorable and quotable and all that kind of stuff, which wasn't the style of, well, it still isn't the style of business books that you find now. So I either thought, people are going to love it or they're going to hate it. And when I saw it finished, looked through it after all the work that went into it, I kind of just thought, I hate it. I just I don't think it's good. And I think I was just probably sick of it. But when it went out there and people got to look at it and started to buy it, it just shot up the charts. And at one point, I think probably after 6 weeks of being on the market, it was number 15 on Amazon. So that's pretty incredible for a business book, especially a different one. Or maybe it's because it was different. I'm sure it was. But it definitely caught people's attention and got, passed around Silicon Valley where I was working at the time, and started to change people's idea of what a brand is. So it was great for me. And then what happened is someone took a bunch of slides that I had created of the whole book, and they put it on a new website called SlideShare, brand new at the time. And I didn't know about it. And it probably took me 2 years to figure out that people were getting it there for free. So I was shocked to see how many views there were of it, thousands and thousands of views, which, that's books I could have sold. Yeah. But I was grateful for it because it actually was probably part of the success of the book, is that it got the word out there, got people reading it and talking about it. And I think by now, if you go to SlideShare, there's like 25 million views or something. So that's going to be one of the most read business books of all time. So
absolutely,
that worked out beautifully for me.
Yeah, well, then, I posted a question in our group just last week about what has been the most influential branding book for you, and hundreds of respondents, and by far the brand Gap was sitting on the top. So it's been so influential to so many people.
Yeah, that's great to hear. It's been going a long time. I mean, it's, people are still buying it at the same rate they were back then. I've written 7 other books on branding and design, but that one still still the one everyone talks about. So it's funny. You can't get away from your first success. It'll haunt you forever. But
haunt you or drive more. And I've read every single one of the others, and the brand gap is the one that kind of changed it all for me. It changed the way I think and about what branding really was. And there are so many quotes from you out there. There are so many quotes from different people about what branding is, because it's such a fluffy thing, because it means different things to different people. But instead of focusing on branding and getting another quote from you about branding, talk to us about brand strategy in a bit more detail. So what is brand strategy to you?
It's a long-term plan to outmaneuver competitors through radical differentiation. And when I say radical, I mean radical. I think what happens is companies believe they're being different because they know that differentiation is strategically very helpful. You don't want to be competing head to head with anybody. But they underestimate how much difference you really need to make it clear to customers that you really are different. So that takes constant work, and companies usually find that even if they start out really different, they kind of collapse to the center after a while. They become normal. They become like everybody else, because I just think humans are like that. We like to fit in, and fitting in is not the best way to stand out. Right?
No.
So it's just counterintuitive for people. So you really have to always think about, how can we be more radically differentiated, knowing that that's going to appear as just a little bit differentiated to the world outside, since they don't care what you're doing. They don't know everything you're doing. So, they're not paying that much attention. You have to exaggerate that difference.
So when we speak about branding, and especially for creatives and professional brand builders, we speak to a lot of people who misunderstand what branding is, and they believe that when you have this visual asset and you have, this website and this presence, that you have a brand. But in what you're saying, without that difference, you really don't have anything that's going to really be a draw card for those people to look towards your brand as opposed to everybody else out there in the market. When you say radically different, how? Because of course we see disruption all the time. We're seeing disruption, but with so many businesses, it's so hard for businesses to go in there and disrupt all the time. How can brands be so radically different? What is the process for defining that radical difference?
Oh, well, there's no easy way. I mean, this takes a lot of judgment and imagination, courage, a lot of things that are difficult to come by sometimes in business, but that's what you need. I mean, it's not going to work otherwise. Some companies are born that way, right? They have an idea that's just dramatically different from the beginning.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, it works, right? But if they didn't create that brand with knowledge of how to do it, with solid theory behind it, what usually happens is when they try to repeat that performance, they fall short because they don't know how they did it the first time. It was an accident. So they have an accidental brand. They came up with something that was different, that they believed in, and sure enough, they found an audience for it. They found a tribe of people willing to buy it. And then when they went to do it again, they didn't realize that they really didn't know how to do it. So what the discipline of branding does is teach you how to do it over and over at will. So that's what good brand people can do. That they've done it many times, and they've seen a lot, and they've worked on different kinds of businesses, and they can come in and get a pretty good aim on what has to happen, and help these companies, because often the founders don't have the background or the the framework for creating something new that has the success factor of the original thing that brought them to the dance.
Mm. Mm. And so Zag is obviously another absolutely outstanding book that you wrote a few years after the brand Gap. And obviously the premise of that book is when everybody else zigs, you zag. And I think a great way for professionals, for branding professionals, to be able to zag is to find an area of specialization. What would you say are the advantages of being specialized in a certain area versus being more generalized and kind of a jack of all trades?
Well, I guess the first thing is you reduce the threat of competition. So what you don't want to do is just be the same as everybody else, because then the only way to win in that competition is by lowering your price. And then that cuts off a lot of options, right? If your profit margins are low, it's just difficult to go anywhere from there. So you end up just working harder and making less money. So you want to reduce competition. Preferably, you want to become number one in a growing category, mm-hmm. either by starting the category yourself, which is what disruption is about, mm-hmm. or by battling your way to the top. And that's the hard way, because usually, brands are perceptions that customers have. That's my definition of a brand. It's a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or company. It exists in customers' minds. It doesn't exist somewhere in the company. It's an effect of the things that you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. So to get a customer to change his or her mind about who's number one in a category is really difficult, right? Mm. You have to do a lot. So it's often easier to just start out as start your own category by stretching it in a way that you're number one in it to begin with. So that's the idea of disruption. Specialization allows you to not compete on price, and to really get more of the right kind of customers, the kind of customers that are going to take you someplace. So, the first thing that people say, if you suggest that maybe they should specialize, they should narrow their offering to a smaller group of people, mm-hmm. Even though that group might be more passionate about what they're doing. So the first reaction is, no, we want to widen it. We want the most number of customers possible. But the world doesn't work that way, because when you broaden your offering to appeal to more people, then you're also broadening it so that you come in competition with more companies. So mm-hmm. what you want to do is narrow it to a place where nobody is, right? You want to find that area where nobody's working. There's no business happening there, but there's an audience. Mm-hmm. And that's hard to find sometimes. You have to really think about that. But it's almost better to find a small, passionate audience that isn't being served, and then grow that audience, rather than say, hey, there's a large audience, maybe we can do something like that and go in there and compete with them. Then you and your competitors are just competing away the profits. You just have to keep lowering your price to win. And that's not really what branding is about. Branding, the goal of branding for many companies is to get more people to buy more stuff for more years at a higher price, not a lower price. So you want more people, you want to grow the business, you want them to buy more of what you're selling for a longer period of time, because your profit margins go way up if you have repeat business. And then, you want to get a higher price. So if you're constantly lowering your price or feeling a lot of price pressure, it's probably because you're not differentiated enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, when you think about it, as you said before, again, it's counterintuitive. And a lot of people have this pushback because they feel if they narrow their field, they have less potential business. But in reality, they're making themselves more relevant to that specific group of people, so that they'll see them a lot clearer than they would if they were broader based and had broader messaging. So I know that this is a struggle that a lot of creatives have out there when they go into the market as a freelancer looking for business, they are afraid to narrow that field because they're afraid of missing out on all of this business. With all the changes that are going on, and obviously it's a different environment today than when, you know, you were doing packaging design with Apple. There's a lot more people out there offering these kinds of services. What can modern creatives do to prepare for the change that's going on so that they can stay ahead of the curve in the coming years?
Yeah. Well, creativity, no matter what branch of it you're in, whether you're a graphic designer or a web designer, programmer, you know, even strategists, those skills can be very powerful, but not by themselves, not as a general offering of skills. You know, hey, I'm a strategist. You need any strategy? You know, that's not going to help. You have to apply it to something, and where you apply it means everything. So if you can find a place to apply those skills where there's nobody else fishing in that spot, and it's something you really, really want to do because you're passionate about it, then you've found it, right? And you may have to kind of change that over the years, you know, because once you get successful at something, things happen. You know, people crowd into your space. The biggest thing that happens, or the worst thing that happens, is that the world moves on to something else, right? And so you have to move with the world, and you also have to consider your changing interests. You know, you want to be able to stretch yourself and do new things. You know, so it's a moving target, and that's you know how things work in the consulting business. So when I was I started as a graphic designer, and then I became a writer because I wanted to control my graphic design. I didn't want people messing it up with, you know, bad copywriting. So I had to learn that, and then I realized that another thing that was messing up my work is bad strategy. I mean, companies with dumb ideas that were forcing me to do something that I knew wouldn't work for them. So I had to learn strategy just in self-defense, but it was a great thing a freeing thing, because once I understood the idea of strategy, I could actually apply it to my own business and become more specialized in a way that would make me happier, but also look at my client's business in a new light, in a more strategic light. And it wasn't long before they were saying, well, you know, you're doing this package for us. Can you do some strategy around that? Like, you know, so we know that we're doing the right thing. And so I thought, okay, I thought you guys were the strategist, you know, you're running the company. So obviously strategy isn't as well understood as I had thought. And that was the problem, right? Companies would come with these briefs that, you know, that didn't make any sense to me, having done this for a while. So I started learning strategy and bringing that to the design work I was doing, and then eventually started just selling the strategy, you know, and the ability to connect strategy and creativity in ways that would add up to something important. So yeah. Anyway, so I kept specializing until I finally realized you really have to be different, and so I picked a niche that was super narrow, which was to be the guy whose company designed the physical packaging, and the graphic design of a package that sold software in a store. Right? So, and it turned out to be mostly business software. So business software in a package in a retail store was that. And, you know, my other design friend said, you're just going to do that? How can there be enough money in that? Well, it turns out if you get, you know, that was a growing category for 10 years. If you get a lot of that, you know, so let's say 25% of that business, because you're the only one that's specializing in it, that can be a huge amount of money, very profitable kind of thing. So, and it was amazing. So that sold me on strategy. So, you know, this idea of narrowing your focus as a powerful tool to get more of the business that you want.
And I think it's important to kind of recall what you said before about, you know, it's not just about putting your flag in the ground and saying, I do brand strategy. It's about applying that to something. And in your case, you applied it to this very, very narrow field. You identified this very narrow field, and you went in there and went all in on this particular area. So that's you applying that rule.
Yeah, you have to go all in. You have to prove that you are the expert in that. And when you start, you may not be the expert, but you're probably more expert than anybody else. If you've identified it right there, that this is something you could really do, probably you're already in the lead. But you need to prove that. And so, I needed to learn everything about what a software package needed to be, since no one knew. I mean, they were just making up stuff. So what does the front have to do? What does the side have to do? What is the top? What's the job of the top? What is the back for? How big should it be? Should they all be the same, or should they vary? Can there be creativity in the shape of the box, or is that a dumb thing to do? How do you symbolize software? How do you show software? All it is it's ones and zeros. So, those kinds of issues became important. And so through testing and theorizing and trial and error, we learned how to do this. And then I could offer that to clients and say, you're probably going to talk to some other firms, ask them if they know about this stuff. Ask them what they know about what goes on each panel of the package, how to increase sales using the package, and so just set it up in a way that they can never win against you, right? Because they won't have the depth that you've got. And you can't really do that if you're doing a million things. If you're spreading your knowledge all over the place, you really need to bear down and work on that thing. Now, eventually you may get tired of doing that. I did. After about 10 years, I just said, this is good money, but I need to move on. And so I just applied the same principles to something new, that I'm going to be a specialist in this other area. And every time you do that, you get there more quickly, because you know what you have to learn and how you're going to present yourself, and how you're going to change over time, and who the competitors, you just learn how to do it. You get a feel for it.
Yeah. Something that I find that's, it's quite entertaining and funny. In our industry, you have so many different perspectives, and because there's a lot of creatives in there, we tend to put our foot in each camp, and a few camps that I've seen come up time and again will be the Marty Neumeier camp versus the Mark Ritson camp versus the Byron Shar camp, and all of these disciplines with branding, with being the Marty side of things, the Byron Sharp being, really heavily detailed on, the science behind why we buy, etc. What do you see as the main difference between brand strategy versus marketing strategy?
Oh, well, marketing and brand really exist on different planes in a way. Not that one's more important than the other. They're both super important. But marketing tends to be more tactical. There are shorter time frames for a lot of it, not all of it, but it's your job to keep revenues coming in like clockwork, right? And to increase those revenues. And that's a big job, right? And brand strategy doesn't worry about short-term sales as much as marketing. It's more concerned about larger strategic issues, larger in the sense that the time horizon is longer. Like you're really planning for long-term success. You're preparing the ground for long-term success. Marketing needs that ground to be prepared. And certainly people in marketing can do branding, but in a large company, the head of marketing, the CMO, is not going to be able to do branding for the company too. It's just they require different sort of energy levels and different ways of thinking. So I think you need both. I think they're complementary. So there's no war between marketing and branding.
Yeah.
And I think, practically people who are in marketing have a better shot of understanding branding than other people. Designers actually can understand branding quite well because they're working with it, but they do have to open their mind to the sort of practicalities of business and marketing. So, all of this stuff is good. But I would say in large companies, there needs to be somebody whose sole responsibility is the brand. If you define the brand as something that unifies the customer community, which is kind of the way I look at it, you need somebody to manage those customers, right? Your goal isn't to extract as many transactions as possible from your customers. If you're a brand person, it's about creating this loyalty in a group of people so that they'll just keep buying stuff from you because they love you, right? And it's not tactical, it's strategic. And so I see branding as more on a level with business strategy. In fact, I don't even see the difference anymore. Business strategy and brand strategy have to be swimming in the same pool. I mean, at the same time, marketing people have to be brilliant in different ways and really on top of it. I mean, branding is like playing sports or something. You're watching the scoreboard every minute. And branding is a little more, say, philosophical than that. And it's more like sort of the bigger moves of a business. And it's all about customers. It's all about who they are and who they want to become. How do you help your customers become what they want to become? That's the whole thing. Not how can you extract as many, dollars out of their wallet as possible. That's more marketing's concern. And that's important too. You don't have a company without revenues.
Yeah.
You also don't have a company without customers. Customers who believe in you and will stick with you even when you make a mistake, right? So anyway, that's how I think about it.
Yeah, and I know that you've been a massive advocate for us seeing somebody in the boardroom who represents the brand only. So that's the chief branding officer. Talk to me about the chief branding officer. What is a chief branding officer, and how do you see that role evolving in the coming years?
Well, the chief brand officer is the person who's speaking on behalf of customers. That's the sort of representing customers to the company and vice versa. And that requires the sort of bridging the gap between logic and magic. Most companies are, in the last 100 years, companies have been all about logic and numbers and sort of left brain stuff. But that doesn't get you into the minds and hearts of customers as much as the magic part. The magic comes from really great touch points, speaking to people in a voice that goes right down inside them. All this kind of stuff is more like art, right? And you got to have both. Yep. So who's going to be responsible for bringing the logic and the magic together? Whoever can do that is probably a natural CBO, chief brand officer. Now, so my poster boy for CBOs is Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, his title was a CEO, but everything he was doing was the role of a CBO, the way I look at it. So he was all about, which products do we produce and how do they fit together? What's the architecture of all these brands, all these sub brands that we have? How do they work together to make to create something more than just the individual products? How do we make 1 and 1 become 11? He was doing that. He was also all about how do we communicate it to people, right? So he was very involved in that. What he was not involved in is shareholder meetings, spreadsheets, the finance part of it. He left that to other people, which is a nice thing to happen. But he was the figurehead for Apple in a way. But the reason that worked is because he was all about customers and, how do we like change their lives? How do we make them into better people? So that's kind of the job of the CBO. And there have been other CBOs, like Claudia Kotchka was the CBO without being called that at Procter & Gamble. And she helped create a huge change there. At Intel, there was Susan Rockrise. So she had to translate between the audience out there and the engineers who are building the products, right?
Mm.
So engineers are like, they don't really understand how other people think. So she had to always be explaining that to them. Look, here's what we need. Here's what the market needs, and getting everybody to work together. So the CBO is really it's an executive job, and it's about how do we get this complex company to execute a simple idea, right? How do we get people to play together and collaborate in ways that make us richer?
Yeah, and I love that, because it really is the setting the foundation for what the brand is all about. And a lot of small businesses, certainly they jump into the visual part of the brand and then straight to marketing without really getting clear on what the brand is about, what their message is, who they're really trying to connect with, and what they want to say, what they want to place in the mind of that audience about what they should mean to them. So
that's how brand, that's the roots of brand go back to identity, basically. Just identifying the product, which is pretty a small part of branding today. So today you need, those elements are important. You have to have an identity, you have to have a tone of voice, you have to communicate with people. You need design, you have to make products, all that, but that's not really what people are buying. People are buying some improvement to their lives usually, and you've got to really have a sense of what they need from you, and you have to be able to fulfill that need in a way that nobody else can. So it's difficult. It's difficult work, but if you don't get the big things right, if those big things aren't in place, all the advertising and marketing and selling in the world is not going to get you where you want to go, because you don't know where you're going. It'll get you someplace, but where? So I think branding is something that informs the whole company and its customers about what we're doing here together. The three big questions that branding answers are: who are you? Who are we? What do we do? Why does it matter? And if I were going to add a fourth one, I would say it's how should we show up in the world?
Yeah. And that's it. It's really about clarity. It's about asking bigger questions rather than just going out there and selling products. Really, the questions that are being answered are, why is this product a good fit for me? And why is this product going to make my life better? And if you're able to get some clarity on that, you find a bridge to really connect with them and step above the noise of everybody else. And that really takes a skill to be able to do that, to find exactly what these people want and how to give it to them in a way that's going to be compelling to them. So with that in mind, what would you say are some of the top skills that strategists need to bring to the table, or that people who are in design at the moment, they want to bridge out to or expand out to strategy? What skills could they develop to become a good strategist?
Yeah, I think designers can be strategists, and they can certainly be strategists in terms of their own work to make sure that it's strategically sound. They have an equal chance to get there, as do other kinds of people who are in leadership roles or marketing roles have an equal chance to get there. But I would say, there's some meta skills that are nice to have. Those are skills that allow you to learn other skills quickly. So curiosity would be really important. Curious people do better at strategy. Imagination, right? Strategy isn't about checking boxes or making lists or anything, although you do a lot of that. It's more like, can you imagine a future that doesn't exist right now? And then you need judgment. You need critical thinking skills. You need to be able to be objective about things and use numbers when numbers make sense, and use intuition when intuition is more useful. You need to become an artist of the possible.
Yeah.
So then, just the practical skills that could go into it, are marketing and design, writing, leadership skills, storytelling skills. Storytelling skills are huge in brand strategy. You have to be able to tell a very simple, compelling story that illustrates your difference and how you're going to make somebody's life better. Storytelling is really good for that.
And do you ever get questions from customers about what the ROI of branding is? Because I know that me personally, I've come across this before. I know that a lot of people in our group, they get talking with clients, and today with so many metrics available for digital marketing, the ROI on this, and it's very easy for business owners like that to chase those metrics so that they can get some kind of guaranteed return on investment. Have you come across that question before? What's the ROI of branding, and how do you answer it?
Well, I think you should try to figure that out. I mean, the simplest answer is you get a brand accountant, and they'll tell you what your brand is worth. So Apple's brand is worth, I don't know, 65% of their the valuation of their total company. Coca-Cola is up there somewhere too. I mean, it can get pretty high. Or you could be like Microsoft was around the turn of the century. They were, I think their brand was worth 17% of the value of their company. So obviously branding wasn't the reason Microsoft was successful. That, they were losers at branding, but they had a lock on the marketplace. So that's kind of like brute strength is what they had. And now since their brand got sort of behind, it's a struggle for them because they never invested in that. And they don't have the lock on the market that they used to have. So I think branding is going to give you more ROI than just about anything. But companies can work around branding. They don't necessarily need it. But I think the best companies, the companies that last a long time, typically have strong brands. Yeah. So in my book, The Brand Flip, I've got a way to measure brands that's very simple. Anybody can do it. It doesn't cost a lot of money. It'll give you a really good heuristic about how your brand is doing. And it's based on the real things you need to measure. You could hire a brand accountant. There are lots of little measurements you can use, and new ones are coming out all the time. And the evidence for brand being very powerful is coming out slowly over the years, but you can even see it in its effect on stock price. It's quite remarkable, actually. So I just think if you know how to do branding and you've got the framework in place, the infrastructure in place to do it, if you really grasp it, you can really do a lot with branding. And I think, again, Apple, great example of how to use branding to really increase your profit margins to the max.
Yeah. And with so many different disciplines out there within marketing and branding, we could go on for days. We've got designers, we've got copywriters, we've got social media managers, marketing strategists, SEO writers, and we seem to be developing this broader understanding now of the importance of strategy. So a lot of them are turning around and looking internally as to how they can bring brand strategy into their world so that they can take what they do and make it more effective. So for professionals like that, designers, copywriters, social media managers, what would your advice be to them to, the first thing that you would do if you were in their position, being an executioner on a certain area? What would you do to kind of step more towards strategy so that you can improve those services?
Well, I think the first thing to do is decide and make the decision that you're not going to do what everybody else is doing. That's the hardest thing. Because we all like to do what other people are doing, especially if they're successful. We want to do something like that, right? But that's not how it works. Strategy is not about copying other people. It's about being original in some way that matters.
Yeah.
I mean, mattering is the new marketing. That's the way I always think about it. Is like, if you matter to people, that's going to be so powerful. And then marketing becomes easier. Selling becomes easier because you don't have to really sell. They come to you, they find you, So how do you do that in your own business? there are many ways, but the way you do it should be unique. And so then you start to think about, well, okay, here's something I could do that nobody's doing. Is it really a good idea? Do I really want to do this? Am I going to be happy doing it for a long time? So you got to ask yourself some sort of deeper questions like that. And then if everything looks good, then you throw yourself into it and just realize that even if this category you're inventing doesn't exist, that doesn't mean it can't exist. But you have to do the work to bring it out to the world, to shape it into something that people can see. It's about cutting cubes out of clouds. You take something that seems amorphous to people and you make it very distinctive, and then you can offer it. You package it, and then you can offer it. I think there's just nothing more rewarding than bringing something new to the world instead of just competing with other people doing the same thing, and then turning bitter because you don't get any respect. I went through a period like that. Is like, I know I'm better than these bigger design firms, but they're getting all the big clients. Well, that's because they're doing something that those big clients are attracted to. And the way you can beat those bigger companies is by doing something that maybe is too small for them to take on. Maybe it's just like they can't make any money doing that, so they're going to succeed by being bigger, or having more offices, or having a track record with working with giant companies. But that's the situation I was in when I decided to design software packaging. I was up against some really big companies, but I found that it was very easy to win in those sorts of shootouts where, they have to choose some firm. When I showed them, here's how you do it. And look at the success I've had. Look at the increases in sales patterns when I do these packages a certain way. And then I start looking at those big companies and going, well, they're big companies, but they don't seem to know anything about this specialty. So since our product matters to us, we're going to have to go with the best. Now, part of that is the wonderful part about that is if you do have a specialty like that, you can charge more for it. In fact, you have to charge more for it if you want to be taken seriously. If you've convinced someone that you are the specialist in this, you need to have a price that's commensurate with that. And so you have to raise your price. I'm sorry to tell you that, but you have to raise your price. You can always negotiate downward if you want to give them a good deal, but you have to set your price. Your anchor price should be pretty high. And so my price I always kept the price for my software design at the highest. If I heard someone was charging more, I would, maybe add another 20% to that price. And I never found that discouraged clients. Usually it attracted them, but they would be the first to say, oh, well, we can't afford that. And then that might open a discussion into why is that? What kind of prices are you seeing? And maybe you could say, if we did it a different way, where I could maybe get the price down 20%, would that help? And you're playing with a huge profit margin that even if you cut it in half, you would make more money than anybody else. So that's a great feeling. That can only happen when you're differentiating really strongly, right? So that's why Apple's profit margins are huge, because no one can do products like they can with such beauty and sleekness. They're chic products, and everything they do is just at a higher level, and it requires that they charge more for that, but also it makes sense to people that they charge more for it. It's attractive. Yeah. So,
and look, I'm not going to keep you here all day. You've got you're there on your Sunday afternoon, but I do want to ask you one more thing about strategy versus execution. So, we will find marketing firms, branding firms out there who will do absolutely everything from brand strategy to identity design, web development, Facebook ads, execution. What are your thoughts on strategy versus execution? Do you believe that the strategist should be involved in the execution of how the brand is expressed in the market, or do you see these things as separate, where you get to focus on the meaning of the brand and allow somebody else to go and execute on that strategy.
So the assumption there is that strategy comes first, and then once you have a strategy, you hand that off to someone who's going to execute it, some designers or creative people, and then they make it, they make it real so that it can go to market. That's really the wrong way to do it. So I think the way to do it is that strategy and execution have to happen at the same time. They have to be intertwined. So it's great if the team of people doing it, the strategists and the creative people, really know each other and can look out for each other and make sure that this strategy can be executed in some really cool way. And also the designers can keep the strategists from doing something that's so boring that they'll never be able to save it. So I think they each have to know something about each other's work. And I would say that, ideally there would be a strategist, a head strategist and a head creative person working as equal partners. Mm-hmm. That's the way to bridge the gap between the logic and magic that I was talking about. So that worked really well in the advertising world back in the 50s and 60s when the creative team was born, where you had a copywriter and a designer working equally, and where they almost finish each other's sentences. Mm-hmm. I think that can work the same at the strategy execution level. Mm-hmm. And we may not be talking about two people. We may be talking about two teams that have to work together.
Yeah.
But I would really advise against doing the strategy first, then the execution, because you've sealed off so many avenues when you say, this is what we're doing, now take us there. It makes execution a tactical thing instead of an equal partner. And I know from being a designer and being in a lot of these collaborative sessions with people that designers come up with ideas that strategists might never come up with. Mm-hmm. And so why wouldn't you avail yourself of those ideas so that strategy is informed by more possibilities?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you have the teams or the skills at your disposal, to have them involved from early on, so that they can have their input as to how this brand might be executed on the outside. It's some great advice. Listen, Marty, I really thank you for coming on the show. Now, if anybody wants to get in touch with Mr. Marty Neumeier, how do they go about doing that? What's the best place to get you on? Where's your most active platform?
Well, I've got two. So one is my author website, and that's just martyneumeier.com.
Yep.
And then if you're interested in learning more about branding and expanding your skills, stretching your abilities a bit, I have a firm called Level C that's teaching branding. So I think it's the only company that's teaching branding specifically from the point of view of people who have done it.
Yep.
And you can be certified in some specialties and work your way up through that. And we're adding more classes all the time. So that's levelc.org. You can see what we're building there. And I think we've got, we just started a couple of years ago, but it's doing much better than we imagined. It's very gratifying. But we've got, I think in 6 months, we'll probably have 1,000 graduates of our various master classes, and they're working their way up from a basic understanding of branding and how to work together on a brand team, all the way up to potentially becoming a CBO.
Yeah. And look, I can vouch for that. I've jumped through the first level. I was really hoping that, because I know that you started, doing those world tours and having the physical classes, and unfortunately we all got cut off with COVID. But hopefully they'll return to the physical environment before too long. Is that what you're hoping? Is that you're hoping to get the show on the road again? Yeah,
we want to do more live classes because we think it's just people need that. They need to meet each other. I mean, part of it is the people that you meet. can really help you. You can help each other. And just enrich your whole experience of branding when you meet other people. It's a little bit harder when you haven't ever sat with them at a table. So we want to do that. But we also, I mean, I'm grateful for the pandemic in that way, that it taught us how to teach online. And that's bringing it to a lot of people who couldn't necessarily get away from the office to go to London, let's say, and take a class for 3 days. So the expense of it, and the time away from the office becomes difficult. So I think we're going to do it both ways. And they both have their advantages and disadvantages. Yeah.
Well, I'm absolutely looking forward to getting back into the classroom, wherever that may be. Maybe it'll be London, maybe it'll be Sydney. I'm not too sure, but I'll definitely be looking forward to catching up with you.
We're hell bent on getting to London to finish our Masterclass 3. In March, and then April we're going to be in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and so that's it for the live locations. We started doing them in more far-flung locations, try to really reach out and get to different cities, but we couldn't get large enough classes to make it exciting, so we've got to force people to come to major hubs to do this. But for those people that can't do that, we do have the online classes, and that's been great. We've really enjoyed teaching them. So
yeah, it's been we've been kind of thrown into the situation, but we've all learned very quickly that it's not too hard. We can all do it. We've all got these computers, and just like you and I speaking on literally the opposite sides of the world, you just get into it and you roll your sleeves up and get on with it.
And when you get to know people from your class or whatever who live in different parts of the world, you can think about collaborating with them long distance over Zoom or whatever. And a lot of our graduates are doing that. They're forming little alliances with other people so that they can accomplish things they couldn't do on their own. And so, the nice thing is that these classes give you a framework for working together. So if you understand brand in the way that I've talked about it in my books, anybody else who understands it that way can easily collaborate, and you'll be on the same page. You won't be arguing about definitions of things.
Yeah. Marty, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I really hope to catch up with you at some stage with that next level C, and I'll look forward to meeting you then.
Thanks so much, Stephen. It's been fun.
Thanks, Marty.
We really hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you want to learn more brand strategy techniques to level up your skills, make sure you check out brandmasteracademy.com. There's plenty of free resources and premium content for you to download and get you going. If you'd like to join our Facebook group full of like-minded brand strategists, all learning from each other, then find us by searching for the Brand Strategy Community, where you can find exclusive content for members as well. If you enjoyed this content, please be sure to give us an honest review on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listened, and make sure you tune in for the next episode of the Brandmaster Podcast.